Hi, this is Anders Wallgren. I'm here at DevOps Enterprise Summit 2015, and I'm joined by Steve Spear, who just gave a great talk on high-performing organizations. And I think one of the things I'm sort of interested in knowing is, you've analyzed and looked at organizations across lots of different industries.
Right.
What are the things that kind of in common between the high performers between different industries?
Yeah, so the hyper short answer is learning. And there's a little elaboration on that. So what we see when we go into the marketplace, whether it's a company like Apple versus its competitors in the smartphone market, or Toyota versus the rest of the auto market, is level playing fields, hyper competitive market space, and yet one or two standouts who their ability to deliver value to market at speed is just huge compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
And so you start getting into the question of, how can someone be so much better at doing something than someone else? So if you and I are doing the same thing, let's say interviewing someone, and you're much better at it than I am, it means because you have more knowledge about how to do it, more skill. Then the question is, where does the skill come from and the knowledge come from? And it has to be that you learned this skill and you acquired this knowledge through learning, which was better, faster, more sustained than my experience.
That's very interesting. So in the software industry, we spend a lot of time these days doing DevOps and continuous delivery and those kinds of things. Some of which are sort of directly borrowing from, say, manufacturing principles and keeping work in progress inventory low and fail fast and all of those kinds of things. What else do you think the software industry needs to look at in terms of being a high performing organization compared to the sort of peer industries?
Yeah, so I think there are two elements that come to mind. One is along the fail fast, and I'll explain that, and then there's the second is the leadership. So the fail fast as an idea I get. So, back if you went to business school in the 80s, 90s, even into, after 2000, the notion of strategy was very positional, right? You found a position where you could build the walls and erect barriers and keep your competitors at bay and lock in and keep control on your customers. And I think people have recognized that kind of a positional approach doesn't work in a hyper-connected, hyper-mobile global environment. So then the issue is, well, if I have to move quickly, I'm going to be moving quickly into things which I don't well understand, so I have to try multiple things and see what works and what doesn't work. And so this is the kind of the bifurcation between the folks who fail fast, well, and learn, and those who don't. So the temptation is, and let's use baking cakes as an example, if I don't know which recipe is the best recipe, let's say I have 5, so I bake 5 cakes, one's good and there are 4 burnt ones. So the natural inclination most people have is I serve the good cake and I throw away the burnt cakes. Right? That's what most people do. In the case of these hyper-learning organizations, they look at the good cake and they say, I didn't learn anything from that cake. It came out exactly like I expected.
Right.
It's the 4 cakes that are the surprise, because I followed the recipe, and yet there's something about the ingredients I use, the way I handle those ingredients, the oven, whatever else it is, that there's something I don't understand. So the hyper-learning organizations study the 4 burnt. I mean, they serve the good cake, right? Because everyone wants cake. It's a birthday party. Yay, happy birthday. But they try to understand why the 4 cakes got burnt, and then try and replicate burnt, and then try to replicate not burnt, because that's where the learning is. So
right.
I think that's one distinction. Now, the leadership connects to that, which is most of us are inclined to serve the good cake, throw out the burnt cakes, and in effect throw away 80% of our investment in learning, right? And it's now in the trash. So the key is to have leaders who model for their organization, coach for their organization, the importance of understanding why the cakes got burnt.
So that really, ties into what we do with blameless postmortems, and obviously you learn a lot more from your failures than your successes in general. So.
Yeah. In fact, if you really want to parse it, you learn nothing from your successes. If you really want to take this to an extreme, things succeeded, and nothing was learned, because what you did was intended to get to success. And it's only the failures from which you can learn. Yeah,
and you assume that because you succeeded, you can succeed again.
That's right.
When in fact the conditions may be very different the second time around.
Exactly right.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. So then, yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, then there's a further elaboration to your point about informative postmortems. So then again, if you're really fundamentally competing on learning speed, the question is, in the process of baking a cake, how quickly can you learn from the experience that things are not going as expected? So most of us, mix up the batter, put the cake in the oven, wait 30, 35, 40 minutes, whatever the time is, take the cake out, and then we say, oh man, something's wrong. But the hyper learners, what they'll do is they'll come up with a much clearer set of expectations way upstream, like how big are the eggs? How long does it take to beat the eggs? What kind of consistency do I get from the batter when I start mixing it? And looking for the aberrations earlier and getting the learning quicker, cheaper, less disruptively up front.
Right, which really sort of ties in with fail fast as well.
Exactly, that's right.
But in order to do that, you have to know a lot about the process that you're going through and sort of internalize it, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciated
welcome.
talking to you, and best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks very much.